Hi, I'm Kat, and today I'm going to tell you all about my bad habits as a reader. I got this idea when I was filming my April wrap-up, and if you don't know, I'll leave it here somewhere for you to see. But one of my favorite books of April was Lord of Shadows by Cassandra Clare. And obviously that is not in any way a new release. Like, that book came out in 2017, and 2020, this present year, was the first time I read it. Which makes absolutely no sense because Cassandra Clare is my favorite author, or one of my favorite authors ever. I knew I was going to love it, especially because I had read Lady Midnight, so it was a continuation of that series. Overall, like, it made no sense for me to procrastinate reading that book, but it is a thing that I do a lot, so it got me thinking about all the little things that I do, which I consider to be bad habits I have as a reader. And I think most of us have some things that we do, we kind of sabotage our reading life, so it got me thinking. I made a list, and now I'm going to tell you all about it. And the first thing, and coming from Lord of Shadows, that I'm going to talk about is I procrastinate reading books that I think I'll love. I mean, tell me I'm not alone here, please, because it's ridiculous. Right now I'm looking at my unread shelf, and I have so many books in there that I've collected over the years and that I know I will absolutely love, but they are not in my immediate TBR because I'm saving them for a special time, for the right time. And one author that I do that so much with is Cassandra Clare. And she does come out with a lot of books. She has, I don't know, maybe 20 out, if not more right now. And her series are incredible. At the same time that I'm excited to read everything she's ever published and everything she's ever written, I'm scared of running out of material to read. And every time she comes out with a new release, I'm like first in line, I have to get it, I love it, I want to support her, but at the same time, I save it. So it comes to the ridiculousness of me having 3 books of hers that I still haven't read, that have come out like 3 years and 2 years ago, and I still haven't read them because... And my second point, which kind of connects with the first one, is that I procrastinate finishing series. And I know a lot of people do this. When we love a series, at least that's the case for me, when I love a series, I don't want it to end. I don't want to see the final chapter of the characters. I want to be with them forever. And I mean, if it is a long series like The Mortal Instruments or let me think, Percy Jackson, something like that. When you spend so much time with the characters, you kind of don't want to say goodbye, and especially because in fantasy, which is where we see most series, the last book usually means some sort of loss, probably a big battle, war of some kind, but it hurts, and I always find a way to just postpone reading those books. The only time I think I don't do that is if I'm so engrossed in the story and I'm maybe marathoning it. When I am like that, in that mode of just thinking about these characters and thinking about the story, that I cannot stop. And in that situation, I don't procrastinate. I read them through, and then I can always reread them if I want. Another bad habit I have, and I don't know if this is very common or not, but one thing that I do consider to be a terrible habit is that I don't really care and I don't really search synopsis for books, for movies, really, for anything. The most common thing for me is to see a cover and to hear someone talking about the book positively for me to just get it on my radar. And because I recognize the cover and I've heard or I've read people telling something good about the book, I'll be slightly interested. And then I'll read something, not really a review, especially not an in-depth review, but I'll know a little bit of the themes, like it's a family drama, or it's a fantasy, or it's contemporary set in high school where the main character is bisexual. I don't know, like I just know some plot points, and usually that is enough for me to be interested in the book or not. And that is a terrible habit to have, because sometimes I go into a story thinking I'm going to read one thing and I end up reading another. And it's not the book's fault, because if I did some research and if I really took my time to just figure out a little bit of the themes and everything more in depth, I would know better what to expect when reading certain books. So for example, I have The Song of Achilles. That book is so well loved by the book community, and everybody, for the most part, has only good things to say about that story. That book was on my radar for years before I bought it, but when I bought it, I was expecting to read a love story. I was expecting to really get to know the characters really well and to explore their relationship more than anything else. And what I got was not that. I got half of that, and the other half was a war book. And it was absolutely my fault, because I was not prepared for that, because I didn't do any research, which is stupid, but I do that so much. The good part of that situation is that most of the times I am surprised for the positive. But sometimes it happens, like I said before, that I'm counting to read a type of story and it doesn't happen. I'm like, well, that's a bummer. I was not counting on the story taking this turn. And so it is 100% my fault. And I don't know if you have that too, where you just know a tiny little bit about the book and it's enough for you to buy it and for you to read it, and if sometimes you come out disappointed, because it happens to me, not a lot, thank God, but enough for me to consider it a bad habit. But to just throw a curveball at all of you, the fourth point on my list is kind of the opposite of what I just told before, of me not caring about synopsis and not researching a lot. My fourth point is that I sometimes spoil myself, which makes no sense considering that sometimes I go into books knowing nothing about them, and other times I go into books knowing who lives, who dies, who pairs up with who. I know I can hear some of you screaming, because generally, most people don't like to be spoiled. And I can understand that, because sometimes it really takes the enjoyment out of a scene when you already know it's coming. I don't suffer from that. I don't mind being spoiled. It's not the end of the world for me. And a lot of times I go searching for the spoilers myself. It's a personality thing. I like to know some things are coming. I like to prepare myself mentally. And once again, fantasy, when we know that a big confrontation is going to go down. I like to have like a safety net on my side of being like, okay, what's going to happen? Who's going to come out of this alive? Who's going to come out of this dead? And I do a lot of spoiling myself, especially for fantasy. And sometimes I'm looking for specific information, like does this character survive the whole series? And inevitably, because of Wikia, where you see everything, sometimes I spoil myself for things that are just, I'm reading book 1 or book 2, and I spoil myself for things that are coming book 5 or book 6. And that happens so much. I read, I think it was 2016 that I read the Vampire Academy books. The amount of things that I spoiled myself without meaning to was absolutely out of this world outrageous, because I was searching. Sometimes it was just the family connections, because there are a lot of families and a lot of relations between those families. So I would go on Wikia just to make sure where everybody belonged, and I would scroll through some character page and I was like, Well, great to know they end up together. Whoever this character is who I haven't been introduced to yet, but okay, fine. Oh, and this character ends up dead. Great. I mean, they're far from dead right now, but good to know. And I do that a lot. It just, sometimes it gives me calm when I'm reading a book to know like, okay, I know where we're headed. And I am a firm believer that when a book is well written, the fact that you are spoiled does not impact your enjoyment of the book. And I say that from experience because I have been spoiled and I've spoiled myself for so many books. And when I actually get to reading the part that I was spoiled about, I am surprised all over again because I am so into the story and what is happening and the progression of everything that I am not counting on, oh, okay, so this is probably where something and something happens. No, you enjoy the book for the journey it takes you on, for the characters, for all the development. A plot twist, sure, it's a fun surprise in a book, but it shouldn't be the end-all be-all of a book. If you are one of those people where spoilers really messed you up and you don't like hearing about spoilers and everything, please tell me down below in the comments why that is. Like, if you are spoiled for a book, do you just not read it because you know what's going to happen? My fifth point on the list is that I avoid reading books with a lot of hype and only end up reading them years later. Usually I'm very late to the party. All parties. So what happens is that I hear and I read people talking about a book constantly, like, this book is great, this book changed my life, favorite book of the year, best book of all time, read it, read it, read it. And what happens is that obviously that book goes on my radar. But because everybody's saying so many great things about it, I am scared that I won't love it. And that happens because people are saying such great things about it that you build it up in your head to be bigger and better than it actually is. So usually when I read a book that people have really hyped up for some reason or another, I tend to be disappointed because I'm expecting something and I get something else. And I really don't like that situation at all. I hate feeling disappointed towards a book because it's not the book's fault, it's not the author's fault. Like, people have built it up because they read it at a great time and they enjoyed it. So for me to give myself the best possible chance of loving a book, I tend to stay away from overhyped books and I read them years and years later. The last point on my list, I don't know if it's the worst, but it is a bad one, is the fact that I don't DNF books. I can't, I know I should, everybody's championing DNFing books, and for me, logically, thinking about it, it makes sense. If you're not enjoying a book, if you've tried reading it, for instance, at different times in your life, and every time you pick it up you don't enjoy it, if you've tried listening to the audiobook and it's still not for you, like, why should you put yourself through that and you're not enjoying it? It makes no sense. Once again, I read books to entertain myself, to enjoy it, to have a good time. And reading something that I'm not enjoying is not having a good time. So I should, logically, be able to DNF books. But I cannot. I don't know, I always have that idea that the author had a point to make. And maybe they took to the last chapter to make it. Maybe everything we went through right now had to go down for us to make sense of it on the last chapter, or something like that. Sometimes it 100% pays off. Sometimes it does. For instance, The Host. If I were to DNF it, I would have DNF'd it at the 50% mark because it was not picking up, it was just dragging a bit for me, and I would have DNF'd it. But because I cannot, I kept at it and then it just picked up. I got the thing we were meant to understand. It wasn't a plot twist, it was just the natural progression of the story. But you only get that if you read the whole book. So because of those situations, I have a very hard time of saying like, oh, this book is not worth my time anymore. I'm just going to DNF it and put it down. I can't. And sometimes it is a waste of my time because I get to the end of the book and I'm like, oh, I hated that. I have to maybe work on that, I don't know, but right now I am not mentally able to DNF a book. So what happens when I usually don't enjoy something on the book or when it's dragging, I tend to search for the audiobook, and sometimes that picks up the story more and makes me want to have renewed interest in the story. And especially because with the audiobook, I always listen at 2 times speed, so the story goes by quicker. It doesn't feel that much of a commitment to just let the story be told to me. I love that. And yeah, that's our video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun filming this, but I also know I talked a lot, so I'm hoping Editing Cat did a good job just putting this video all together and making me make sense. Let's hope. But tell me down below in the comments some of your bad habits as a reader, if you have them, of course. Tell me if we have something in common, because I would like to not be alone. It would be great to know that we have something in common. And yeah, that's it for today. I'll see you next time. Bye!